It was 2:14 in the morning when my best friend called me, not to vent, not because something was wrong, just to talk. And somewhere around minute 40, she asked me why I'd never said anything. I knew exactly what she meant. I'd known for 6 years. I still didn't have an answer ready. The silence on the line lasted 4 full seconds. I counted. Then I told her the truth, and the truth changed both our lives by sunrise. My name is Owen Reyes. I'm 33. I work in furniture restoration, which means I spend most of my days quietly fixing things other people gave up on, which is either ironic or exactly on the nose, depending on how charitable you want to be about my personal life. I live alone above my own workshop, with a dog who snores louder than the table saw and a phone that almost never rings after midnight. Except for one person. Her name is Priya Banerjee. She's 32. She teaches middle school science, which means she has the patience of a saint and the bluntness of someone who spends all day correcting 12-year-olds. We met in college, in a shared kitchen, arguing over whose turn it was to deal with a sink full of dishes neither of us had dirtied. We've been best friends for 6 years since. She always carries the same beat-up canvas tote bag, covered in pins from places she's traveled, half of them inside jokes only, I understand. That bag has been to 4 countries and through 2 breakups. Hers, not mine, and somehow still smells faintly like the bookstore she used to work at in grad school. We talk almost every day. We've never dated. People ask why constantly. Friends, her sister, my mother, more than once a barista who'd clearly been listening too closely. The answer I gave everyone, including myself, was always the same. We're too good as friends to risk it. That was the story I'd been telling for 6 years. It was a good story. It just wasn't true. The night it started, the kitchen smelled like burnt popcorn and the particular staleness of an apartment that's had the windows shut all day. It was up late, sanding a chair leg I'd been avoiding for a week, music low, half asleep on my feet, when my phone lit up the room. Priya, 2:14 a.m. Everything okay? I answered, already reaching to turn down the radio alarm so I hadn't actually turned on. Everything's fine, she said. I just couldn't sleep and I wanted to talk to you. Is that weird? You've called me at worse hours for worse reasons. That's not actually reassuring. He sat down on the workshop stool, sawdust on my hands, and just let her talk. About nothing important. Her sister's wedding planning. A student who'd cried over a B+ on a quiz about volcanoes. The new ceiling fan in her bedroom that ticked when it spun, which was apparently keeping her up, which was apparently the actual reason she couldn't sleep. Except it wasn't. And we both seemed to know it. 20 minutes in, she got quiet in a way she doesn't usually get quiet. Can I ask you something and you actually answer honestly? She said. You can ask me anything. Whether I answer honestly is a separate negotiation. Owen, fine. Yes. Go. She didn't go. Not right away. The pause sat there long enough that I noticed it. The first crack wasn't dramatic. It rarely is with us. Do you remember the wedding? She finally said. Marcus and Elena's, 2 summers ago. I remembered it the way you remember weather. Not as an event, but as a feeling. Humid air, string lights. Air in a green dress she still owns and still wears, sometimes without knowing what it does to me. I remember, I said. We danced. To that terrible cover band's terrible cover of Something Good. I remember that too. You held onto my hand about 4 seconds longer than the song needed you to, she said. I noticed. I never said anything. That landed somewhere I wasn't braced for. Something in my chest shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. I noticed you noticing, I said, before I could think better of it. The line went quiet again. Different kind of quiet this time. This is where it should have ended. The easy, the niable way. A laugh, a change of subject, both of us pretending the moment had been smaller than it was. That's what we'd done every time before. And there had been a few times before, scattered across 6 years like breadcrumbs, neither of us wanted to follow all the way home. Instead, she asked the question, why did you never say anything, Owen? Not angry, not accusing, just tired, in the specific way someone gets tired of carrying the same unopened envelope for years and finally setting it down to see what's inside. I have poor survival instincts around women who ask questions like that at 2 in the morning. He sat there with sawdust on my hands and a half-sanded chair leg in front of me. and genuinely considered for one full second. Telling her the ceiling fan excuse was probably true after all, and we should both go to bed. Then I didn't, because you got out of a bad relationship right after we met, and you said you needed time, and I decided your timeline mattered more than my feelings. I said. And then more time passed, and it started feeling like the friendship was the safer thing to protect. So I protected it by not telling you anything true. That's not hiding, she said. That's hiding with better branding. I laughed once, short, surprised out of me. Accurate. I changed your contact name in my phone 2 years ago, she said. Quieter now, the words coming faster. Like she'd been holding them so long pride had stopped being able to compete with gravity. It doesn't say Owen anymore. It hasn't for 2 years. What does it say? She told me. I'm not going to repeat what it said here. Some sentences belong to the person who finally said them out loud at 2 a.m. after sitting on them for 2 years, not to anyone listening after the fact. But it wasn't a joke, and it wasn't small. And once it was out of her mouth, she went quiet in the specific way of someone who just heard her own voice say something she'd never planned to say first. I sighed that too fast, she said. I didn't mean to say that. I'm glad you did. Owen. I'm glad you did, I said again. Because I've been calling you something different in my head for about 4 years and never once said it out loud. So we're roughly even on cowardice. Neither of us said anything for a moment after that. I could hear her breathing on the other end, and the faint, stupid ticking of her broken ceiling fan. And somewhere outside my workshop, a car alarm went off. 2 streets over. Badly timed, completely unrelated, the kind of small, ordinary interruption that makes a moment feel real instead of cinematic. You don't have to say anything else tonight, I told her. If this is a 2 in the morning thing that feels different by sunrise, we can pretend this call was about the ceiling fan. I mean that. I'm not going to make this harder than it already took you 2 years to say. I don't want to pretend it was about the ceiling fan. Okay. I've wanted to tell you for 2 years, she said. I just didn't want to be the reason the only stable thing in my life stopped being stable. Priya, you weren't risking the friendship. You were risking telling the truth in a friendship that's already survived worse than the truth. She was quiet again, and I let her be quiet, because some silences need room instead of words. Every person I've dated since that wedding felt like a placeholder, I finally said. You never did. Not once. Every time something good happened, you were the first person I wanted to call. Every time something fell apart, still you. I've just been calling that friendship for 4 years because it was easier than calling it what it actually was. That sentence did something quiet to me just now, she said. Good. It was supposed to. We talked until almost 4 in the morning. Not about logistics. Not about what came next. Just about everything we'd both been quietly not saying for years, now finally out in the air between 2 phones and 2 apartments, 3 miles apart. At one point, she laughed, the real kind, not the nervous kind, and said something about how she was definitely going to be a wreck in front of her 7th period class tomorrow. And I said something about how I had a chair leg that was never going to get sanded at this rate, and somehow that was funnier than it should have been at 4 in the morning. He drove over the next afternoon, not because either of us asked, just because it felt like the kind of thing that needed to happen in person and not over a phone line. Even a phone line that had just rearranged everything. She opened the door holding the same beat-up canvas tote bag she always carries, like she'd been about to leave for something and then hadn't. We stood there for a second too long, the way you do when 6 years of careful distance is trying to collapse all at once. Hi, she said. Hi. Neither of us said anything else for a moment. Then I closed the distance, slow enough that she could have stopped it, and she didn't. And the rest of that afternoon went the way 2 in the morning phone calls sometimes get to go if you're lucky enough to follow them all the way through. 3 months later, Priya still calls at strange hours. Except now it's because she wants to talk, not because she's working up the nerve to. She still keeps that canvas tote bag by the door. I still haven't finished that chair leg. A year after that, she moved her things into the apartment above the workshop. One box at a time, mostly books in that bag, and a ceiling fan she swore she was finally going to fix herself. And never did. Because apparently some things are funnier left broken. 2 years later, when people ask how we got together, she tells it differently every time depending on her mood. But it always starts the same way. A phone call at 2 a.m. that was supposed to be about nothing. It wasn't new, what happened that night. It had probably always been there, sitting behind both our teeth for years, waiting for one of us to run out of safer ways to feel it. What would you have done if your best friend called you at 2 a.m. and asked the one question you'd spent years avoiding? And have you ever kept something from someone you loved simply because the friendship felt too good to risk? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.